Hey friends, I'm Jess Connolly. I'm an author, a coach, a Bible teacher, and a local church leader, and I love talking to real people who know what it means to have full lives, but also want to walk in abundance. This podcast is for you. It's not my podcast, it's ours. It's for people who crave lighthearted conversations and deeply spiritual truth. It's for people who are busy, tired, waiting, growing, dreaming, working, or praying about what's next. Wherever you're listening from, if it's quiet, mundane, or busy, I am praying for you, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's go. I don't know if 2024 was the best year of your life or the worst. I don't know if you're raring to go, ready to run into 2025, or if you're taking it real slow, trying not to make any sudden moves. But I do know this. Your past year deserves reflection, and this coming year deserves intention. So, after a short podcast hiatus, I'm trying to practice what I preach and diving in to recap what worked, what didn't, and cast some vision for what comes next. Let's go. Hello, friends. Jess here. I want to welcome you back to the Jess Connolly podcast. A reminder that this is not my podcast. It's our podcast. And I want to just acknowledge the brief hiatus we have been on. We took a long break. We haven't had episodes for the last few months. And I said it was a brief break, and then I just said we took a few months off. So depending on how you look at it, that was not our plan. We had incredible episodes planned throughout the end of 2024. And as I've shared in podcast episodes throughout the whole year of 2024, this has just been an incredibly difficult year for our family. Some stuff we've shared publicly, some stuff we haven't been able to, but it was just really, really, really difficult year. And for a lot of that year, I would still wake up, do my day, hit record on the podcast, keep going to work. And I went to a therapy session near the end of October. Honestly, nothing newly fresh, hard was happening by that point in our year. But I was realizing that emotionally, the year had just taken a toll on me emotionally and mentally, and I needed a little space to grieve. I needed just some time to not always be on. And my therapist asked, she was like, listen, I know you've done a really good job of getting support where you need it and asking for help and feeling your feelings and doing all that. But is there anything else you can do to really just give yourself some space to feel, to grieve, to process? And immediately I was like, yes, there is something I could do. I think I can go off social media. And I just knew that kind of even feeling this pressure to show up on social media and have something helpful or wise, or even being able to summarize my own thoughts about my own life, that nobody was asking me to do that, but I felt that pressure. And so I was like, okay, I think I want to take a break from social media. And she was like, okay, great. And I was like, well, the only problem is if I take a break from social media, that's one of the main places that I share about the podcast, that I let people know, hey, we have a new episode up. And she was like, okay, well, could you take a break from the podcast as well? And immediately in my mind and my body and my spirit, that felt right. Without much warning to you guys, obviously to the listeners, that's what we decided to do. My team pivoted and we moved all those episodes and just said okay, we'll come back when we come back. And to be honest, my plan throughout the fall kind of changed. Sometimes I was like, oh, I'll definitely come back to social media in January. And sometimes I was like, I'll probably let the calendar turn and see how I feel. I don't know if I'll immediately be ready to do the podcast episode. And my team was just really supportive about, okay, let's just wait and see what you need. And then as December kind of wound down, I was like, I think I'm ready. I think for me, actually staying away from sharing on social media and on the podcast started to make me feel like, okay, everything has to be better. I have to be better before I come back. And to be honest, the kind of heartbreak and heartache and burdens that we've walked through in 2024, they're just not necessarily the kind of years that you immediately get over, the kind of pains that you immediately get over and you come back and you're fine. And so I started feeling this invitation from the Lord to figure out how to show up, maybe not 100% healed, maybe still processing some of the pain and doing it privately and where I need to and where that's safe, but also stepping back into this part of my job that I actually love so much, which is making space for other people to think about their lives, to think about their walks with the Lord, to think about how they can live fully awake. And so I just want to say, number one, thanks for the grace, but also thanks for being here, because I do so love my job. I feel so incredibly grateful to get to be a person who creates a space where I can say, like, hey, are we all living fully awake? Are we stepping into all the abundance that God has for us? And here's what that looks like for me. And I'm curious what it looks like for you. It's just a joy to get to do that as my job. So I just want to say thanks. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for being patient while I was gone. My plan is to keep hosting the podcast every week for the rest of the year. I actually, during a little end of year vacation with my family last week, I was not planning on working. I wasn't working. I wasn't thinking about working. And I was on a treadmill, just getting a little like vacation move in. And all of a sudden, the first 3 months of the 2025 podcast came to me. And I was like, I got it. I see it. I can see every episode. I had all this vision. I had all this excitement about what to do on the podcast. And so I'll share a little bit about that in this episode. But more than anything, I just, again, want to make space to be able to live share with you some things that worked, some things that didn't, and talk about what comes next. Now, listen, first of all, I want to just tell you, I'm no Taylor Swift, but I understand something about Swifties that they love is an Easter egg. And I think I understand this about Taylor, is that she likes to plant little Easter eggs. And I will tell you, there's a very large Easter egg in this episode, meaning there are some words that are a very big foreshadowing to something you're going to hear me talking about in 2025. And that's all I'll say for now. But if you pay attention closely, I don't know, you might get some big foreshadowing. You might notice a big Easter egg about something I'm going to be really excited to keep talking about. But that being said, let's dive in. 2024. Personally, I've never been so happy to see a year go. You know how like every year at the beginning of the year, a lot of us, maybe you relate to this or maybe you don't, a lot of us have a hard time transitioning to writing the new year. Like you have a hard time, I'm so used to writing 2023 or I'm so used to writing 2024. I don't know how I'll be able to write 2025. I'm going to tell you what. Around October of 2024, I was like, I'm ready to write 2025. I don't think I want to write 24 anymore. I'm ready for 25. And I know that nothing magical happens when the date turns. But at the same time, again, this year was just so incredibly hard and so incredibly difficult and so incredibly surprisingly difficult that I've got some relief to see it go. That being said, I don't want to miss what God did. I don't want to be dismissive about the grace and the miracles and the fruit. And if I'm being honest, it would be easy for me to feel a lot of defeat already moving into 2025. And instead, I want to fight that urge and speak life over the year to come. So that's what this episode is for. I'm going to talk a little bit about personally for me, what worked and what didn't, and talk a little bit about what comes next. So first of all, let's talk goals. So for 2024, I kicked off the year with episode 22, where I shared my major 6 goals for the year. I actually did a recap on that goals episode on episode 44, about halfway through the year, where I said, like, hold on, let's do a recap. What worked and what didn't, what's working and what didn't. And I shared a lot in both of those episodes. So at the beginning of episode 22, I shared that my 6 goals for the year were 1, disciple my kids, 2, launch a best-selling book in Tired of Being Tired, 3, live simple and supernatural, 4, get in the best shape of my life, 5, move into our new house. 6, lead, go, and tell gals to growth. And I really in depth, if you haven't listened to episode 22, I really in depth unpacked each of those things, but I'll do it briefly here so you don't have to go listen. I obviously disciple my kids. I don't have to massively unpack, but I'll give you a little recap of what I said about that in episode 44. I talked a little bit about launch a best-selling book, and I talked about kind of this tension for authors that like, absolutely, would we write the book for one person? Yes. But if you love people and if you believe in the message God's given you, you also want to get it in as many hands as possible. And also writing a book is a tricky business because you spend a couple of years working on it and then you have a lot of pressure. It's probably too strong of a word, but it's also a very honest word. A lot of pressure built up around book launch of like, how is it going to go? Am I going to do a good job? Am I going to be able to market this well? Are people going to like it? And that also affects your future as a writer past that book launch. Are you going to be able to write more books? Are people going to want to keep hearing from you? And so I talked a little bit about my heart behind saying my goal was to launch a best-selling book and wanting to hold that loosely. My goal to live simple and supernatural was really about basically like a spiritual minimalism. I wanted to spend less money. I wanted to have less stuff in my life. I wanted to clear out what I could to make as much room for the Lord. I talked a lot about my number 4 goal, get in the best shape of my life, especially as an author who wrote the book Breaking Free from Body Shame. And for me, what that meant, get in the best shape of my life. And it didn't mean get to my smallest size. It didn't mean get to a place where I was aesthetically pleasing to other people or where I was fitting goals, but it really meant like, hey, if I am living free, if I'm treating my body like it's good, I wonder what it would be like to really try to steward my body like maybe the best I ever have, inside and out, just really like get as strong as I can and take the best care of my nutrition that I can. And I gave a big update on that in episode 44, and I'll talk a little bit about that. My number 5 goal was to move into our new house. I had talked a little bit about on that episode, this just wild miracle we've been living in, and a dream maybe turned a little bit of a nightmare, at least at times, where God just provided this incredible way for us to buy this house. We began renovating it now over 18 months ago, which has been a really wild experience. Spoiler alert, we still have not moved into our new house. And then lastly, lead, go, and tell gals to growth, which I'm excited to give a little bit of an update on that, what it looked like to lead, go, and tell gals our business to growth. All that being said, I shared those 6 goals for the first time in episode 22. And then I came back and did a recap episode in episode 44. And you can listen ad nauseum. I mean, should you want to, but the major updates were, we ended up talking a lot in that episode about discipling my kids and how I realized that that was maybe not the best wording for that goal. That discipleship is interesting because it works best when someone consents and asks to be discipled. And I wasn't in the season of my life where all of my kids were asking for that. I would say what ended up happening, if I could give you an end of 2024 update, is I did lead my kids. And I didn't always do it perfectly, but I do feel like I led my kids, and I feel like Nick and I were able to lead our family through, again, a really, really tough year. When I look back on some of the moments that we lived through, but also that we helped our kids live through, I am incredibly grateful for the grace and the strength that God gave us, for some of the really hard conversations that we had, for the times we had to pray together. Just the other day, my daughter and I were talking about just even like the sensation of what it felt like to walk down the aisle at my stepdad's funeral, which, was the first big rocking pain that, I mean, honestly, the most lasting, wild rocking pain that ended up shaping the rest of our year. We were just talking about, man, this is what it felt like when we stood at the back of that room and made our way down the front, and how surreal it was, and also how beautiful it was. And I was able to just turn to her and say, like, I'm so proud of you. Like, we did that. Not only am I so proud of my mom and I'm so proud of the rest of the family, but I'm also just proud of the teens. Like, I'm proud of my kids who lived through that and loved each other through that and loved us through that. So all that being said, I talk a lot about maybe not using that word discipling my kids, since not all 4 of my kids have asked for that, have necessarily wanted that in their life. And we talked a good bit about this in episode 44. And I have to say, as I saw some of you at speaking engagements or as I got DMs from you throughout the year, you really seem to resonate with that conversation. Like, what language can we use or is maybe most helpful to use? And what do we do when we really want to disciple our kids? We want to train them up in the way that they should go, but like, what does that actually mean? And so, a major point that I made in episode 44 is why that was probably not the most helpful language is that was a lag measure and not a lead measure. And we talked about lead measures versus lag measures. Anybody in the business world is probably familiar with these. But a lead measure is essentially something you can do to achieve a goal. A lag measure is like the fruit that comes from those tasks that you can do to achieve a goal. And so I realized I had a lot pent up in those words of discipling my kids. Really, what I had was specific expectations of the fruit that I would see come from that. And that is actually not mine to control because they're their own people. They're their own souls. They're their own life. They get to make their own decisions. What I could control was the lead measures, how I wanted to lead them, how I wanted to speak into their lives, how I wanted to be present for them, and how I wanted to show up for them. So we talked about that a good bit in episode 44. And I just kind of gave a big update on the rest of the goals. I talked about, honestly, like the beauty of the Tired of Being Tired book launch, but to be totally transparent, launching a book that I'd worked on for years, 2 days after my stepdad's funeral was incredibly different, incredibly difficult. It's obviously not how any of us saw that going. And I talked about this, I think, a little bit in episode 44. It's really difficult when you've got just a team of people. I mean, maybe close to 15 or 20 people who have been working on this book for years. And in the weeks leading up to the launch, I obviously just had to not show up in the ways that I had planned to for years. In fact, when I look back at April 9th, when I look back at the launch day of Tired of Being Tired, the truth is I have pictures of it and I do not remember a lot of it. It's hard to even place myself in those moments because my heart was somewhere else. My mind was somewhere else. And our family had just honestly been through so much. My stepdad, who was incredibly important to our entire family, I mean, that's just a massive understatement, passed away on the 5th. And really unexpectedly. And his funeral was on the 7th, 2 days later. And then my book launch was on the 9th, 2 days after that. And so the entire team, really, we all tried to show up and do what we could. So many people rallied to help us share about the book. I got back to the work of launching a book as soon as I could, as heartbroken as I was. But all that being said, it was just really, really different. And that's all I really have to say about it. But I'm really proud of that book. And I love Tired of Being Tired. And I'm so grateful I get to keep talking about it for as long as God will let me. I'll give you a little update on living simple and supernatural. I don't think I did that at all this year. I saw God move in supernatural ways, but I don't think I ever got to really start making any big moves about simplifying our life. Now, I will say I started to make a couple. We did a massive decluttering day in our family back in November that was so life-giving and really just kind of pared down everything in our house. And that was really life-giving. And I want to continue to do the same in my wardrobe and in my schedule, etc. And I will say in some ways, grief did that for me. Like, I could not have a ton on my plate. I could not meet like everybody else's expectations or even my own expectations. And so in that way, my schedule got very simple and my tasks got very simple. I got very clear about what I could do and what I couldn't do and what I should do at work and what I shouldn't do, but not massive moves made in that area. Moving into our new house, again, still a huge blessing and a miracle in the making, but it has become really difficult. We've been renovating this house for 18 months. We've just gotten to the point where it is incredibly expensive. But you can hear more of the story in episode 22, but we'd originally hoped to be in by this Christmas. Secondarily, I hope to be in by early January, then early February. And now I think if we can move in February, it'll still be a miracle. It'll still be incredible. And I'm excited to just see what that looks like. And I think it may take couple of months to keep getting settled into that new house. And I shared on a last episode that we named the house House of Grace. And so I'm excited to see how we can host people in new ways there and love people in new ways there and grow community in new ways there. And in a lot of ways, it's going to be really restful for our family to have just a little bit more space, because right now we're in downtown Charleston and incredibly limited in space in many different ways. But I'll be sharing more about that online when and if we get into the house. I obviously shared that getting into the best shape of my life was a goal for me. I gave an update in episode 44 where I said, I kept moving, I kept eating, I kept fueling my body, but really until about October of this year, I feel like in a lot of ways, like my body, I was really grateful for how it carried me, but I was not able to massively pay attention to my body or my health in any way, shape, or form that would look like moving forward. Around October, I realized okay, I've got to steward my body. And I talked a little bit about this on the very last episode that aired before we took a hiatus, where I talk with my health coach, Meredith, and I'm going to share some more updates in future podcasts. But I do feel like near the end of the year, I was able to really get back in my body. Shout out to the Maggie Rogers song, pay attention to somatic needs, pay attention to my hunger, pay attention to my nutrition, pay attention to my energy levels, my sleep. I have to say I'm sleeping now more than I have in years. And I feel like it's really making a massive shift for me. I'm just trying to do all the things that I know to do that are good for my autoimmune disease, etc. For in general, just being a 40-year-old woman, but I'll share more updates on that in a future episode. So it wasn't the massively victorious achievement of goals, but it was near the end of the year. I was really grateful for the energy that I had to steward my body and take care of her. And then lastly, Lead Go and Tell Gals, my small business to growth. We experienced so much growth this year. We experienced a lot of internal growth. Our team, we just solidified in new and incredible ways. I have shared this publicly and privately, but they have been some of the most supportive and encouraging women, have really carried me through this year. But I also think we're all incredibly excited about the vision that God's given us for 2025 and the future. And I'll share a few things about that in this episode as well. All that being said, those are my 2024 goals. And while I have not officially set 2025 goals, for the most part, those 6 areas of focus are still probably going to be the main 6 priorities that I pay attention to this year. Well, not the book. I would say my kids, living simple and supernatural, taking care of my body, moving into our house, and then leading Go and Tell Gals to Growth. Those still feel really, really important to me. And I'll share a little bit in a second about a new way I'm going to approach goals for this year. Before we get any further, I want to tell you about a guide that I have created called Soft Start. So this guide is for any of you who are maybe a little bit like me, and maybe you are not running fast and furious into the new year. As I sat down to create this guide, I usually make some kind of goals guide for the new year. But as I sat down to create this guide, I really just couldn't shake the weight of last year and how it was more hard and more holy than I could have ever imagined. And so I created this guide in that vein for women like me who might be moving into 2025 with a tender heart or a weary soul, or maybe even just a quiet hope that this year can feel a little bit lighter. So I have now moved a lot of my communication to my Substack community, the Fully Awake Women's Club, and anyone who is a $5 a month subscriber to all of my paid content on the Fully Awake Women's Club will get this guide. And so if you are not already a subscriber over there, a paid subscriber, I want to just encourage you. It's an incredible guide. It's 18 pages long. And also, we are hosting a webinar where I'm going to just walk anyone through the guide who wants to use it on January 8th. So you can find out more about that in the show notes, but you can get that guide, Soft Start, a goals guide for 2025, if you are a paid subscriber, just $5 a month, over at the Fully Awake Women's Club. All right. So if we're talking about what worked and what didn't, I want to dive right in. I hope that if nothing else, hearing me be a little bit vulnerable and honest about what worked and what didn't in 2024 gives you some bravery and courage to do the same for yourself. I will say that I just went on a walk with my husband. As I am recording this, it is Tuesday, December 31st. So I'm recording it on the last day of the year. And Nick and I just went on a long walk and we just talked about what worked and what didn't. And so I'm going to actually just share exactly what he and I shared, what I shared with him about what worked and what didn't work for me in 2024. So I want to start just being as humble as I can be. I'm humbled. I'll tell you that. I'm humbled. I want to start humbled and honest. And I think the good news is we can get stuck in cycles of self-introspection and wanting to diagnose ourselves or say this is who I am, or this is how I did, or this is what was good, this is what was bad. I don't want to get stuck in that. And I don't sense that God is inviting me to get stuck in that. But with some honest reflection, I want to tell you the biggest thing that I just told my husband, this is what didn't work for me this year. Matthew 7:24 through 27 says this. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. So when I was just on this walk with Nick, I referenced that passage. And I said, babe, if I'm being honest, I feel like what did not work for me about 2024 is that my faith was not ready. I feel like I wasn't ready for the storm. I feel like I was just tossed in the wind. I feel like a lot of the walls of my house felt like they came down. I had a really hard time trusting God in the midst of grief, both the things that we shared publicly and the things that were happening privately. I wrestled intensely with fear, just really intensely with fear and anxiety. And then, to be honest, in the fall was essentially diagnosed with clinical depression. And I don't see any of that as a failure. And I feel so much compassion for myself. But if I'm being honest, I would say I wish to some degree my faith had felt stronger and I had felt more prepared for this year. Now, I will tell you that my husband had a differing opinion. And I almost told him before I talked, I was like, I don't want you to say anything. I was like, I don't, because I knew what he was going to say. And I knew he was going to say, you're being too hard on yourself. That's not what happened. But he said, I don't know, babe. Even looking at that verse, I would just say, the foundation stood. I was reminded of even just something I had told him and my sister and my brother-in-law the other day. I was telling them that in the hardest days of the last year, if I'm really honest, I had just so much doubt when it came to the Lord. And I was like, where are you? Are you real? Why are you not bringing healing or relief or moving in these different ways? And I told them one thing that really encouraged me is that I always would find that I was talking to God about doubting God. And that would encourage me. And I would just say well, I'm encouraged that you're still the only one I would talk to, that I want to talk to about my doubt. I just say that because, again, I want to be honest and humbled and say, going into 2024, I was a woman who was in the Word really intensely. I am in church leadership and I'm spending time in prayer and I believe in miracles. And also, I believe that sometimes we don't always get our way. And I'm a woman who's experienced pain in the past. It's not like I've had an easy, completely tidy life and all of a sudden I didn't get my way. But when I look back at the year, what was so difficult about it is that it was just like kind of hard thing after hard thing after hard thing after hard thing. And I could never really get back on my feet. I could never really catch my breath. I can't tell you how many times I said privately to my therapist, to my friends, like, I just can't get my mind around all that's happening. And all that being said, I just want to hold both to say, the foundation did stand. And I find myself at the end of 2024 just still worshiping the Lord and grateful to say that I worshiped Him and cried out to Him on the hardest days. And that on my most, intense moments of doubt, it's still Him that I'm talking to. But there is a piece of me that wishes I just felt more ready for this storm, that wishes that I had maybe a more immediate faith-filled response. And I don't know if I could have done anything differently. I don't know. I just want to be honest and say that. And again, don't feel any need to get stuck there, but I just want to hold that and be honest about that. And if nothing else, encourage you to say, like, you can be in the Word, you can be in community, you can have amazing rhythms. You can be spending time with the Lord in prayer. You can have regular rhythms of worship, and pain can still really take you for a loop. It can still really just knock you down. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about that. What didn't work was I'm not sure I was ready for the storm. I had two other things that are small that I really scanned the rest of 2024. And after saying that, I would just say I feel a lot of compassion for myself about everything else that came after that, or every other piece of like fruit that maybe moved out of not feeling ready for that year. But my other two things are small. Number two is mascara did not work for me in 2024. I tried to make it work many times. I tried every kind of waterproof mascara I could put my hands on, and it's a no-go for me. I've given up. I've given up on lash extensions for the time being because I cried so much in 2024 that they just stopped staying on. And then I was like, well, it's okay. I'll try waterproof mascara. And that was a no-go for me. Something about the shape of my eyes. I have one very honest friend who will be honest with me about that. It's my friend Anna, who works with me at Go and Tell Gals. And she says, like, I don't understand your eyes. There's something about them. Mascara does not stay on them. It runs off my eyes, even if it's waterproof. And at the same time, the lash extensions aren't working. And I'm wanting to live more simple so I can see the supernatural, and going to get my eyelash extensions done every couple of weeks and spending money on that is probably not going to be a priority for me in 2025. So all that being said, if you see me and you're like, wow, it looks like she doesn't have lashes, it's just because mascara doesn't work for me. It's not going to be what God has for me. And I'll probably be wearing sunglasses a lot and it's fine. And my face is fine. Everything's fine. My number three thing that I would just say that didn't work for me, this is more business related, but it was actually like a very big aha for us at Go and Tell Gals. And that is that I think for the most part, we are going to move off of making Zoom coaching or internet coaching a priority. We realized we think our main gal that we coach is really fatigued with Zoom, and we are pretty fatigued with Zoom. And I'll share kind of what we see coming in its place in just a moment. So those are my big things that didn't work: faith, not feeling ready, mascara, and Zoom. Here's what did work for me in 2025, being in seminary. I'm so grateful. I think if I had known the year I was going to have in 2024, I probably wouldn't have signed up to go get my master's degree in 2023, but I'm so grateful that I stuck with it. I often told people that I felt like I trauma bonded with seminary, but a lot of days, specifically through the summer and the early fall, it was just something I could do, work on my school, get my reading done, take quizzes, write papers that made sense in my life. 1 + 2 = 3. And I was really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for the women I'm in seminary with. I'm really grateful for everything that I've been learning. I'm really grateful for my professors at Denver Seminary in the women's leadership cohort. We just have the world's best professors. And so, I've cried in the arms of a professor. I have cried through a class. I've asked deep questions about my faith. and also gotten to learn more about the word and really gotten to just get back into being a full-fledged Bible gal, which is a huge joy in my life. So seminary worked. Walking my son, Cannon, to school. I shared a little bit about this in the Fully Awake Women's Club on Substack a couple months ago, but it is the gateway rhythm that keeps me healthy in so many different ways. And near the end of the 2023-2024 school year, in the midst of losing my stepdad and walking through a series of different trials, I stopped walking Cannon to school. I started driving him to school. And every day I would just feel like so much defeat. I was like so tired. I was having a hard time getting out of bed. I was, I just wasn't in a place to like get up a little bit earlier and walk him the half mile to school and back. And this year, this fall, Cannon and I made a commitment. We were like, let's walk to school every single day. Let's just see if we can do it. And it has been so life-giving, and it's been such a shift. I ended up moving into a lot more walking rather than running for the year. So I would a lot of times drop him off at school and then go for a long hour-long walk, which ended up being so helpful for my faith and my mind and my body, and just was such a nice gateway rhythm. I will say I've had to drive Cannon to school like maybe 3 times. Once it was raining pretty hard. We have walked in the rain a handful of times. Once it was raining pretty hard. And then I think one time I don't know, I couldn't find my tennis shoes or something. And then one time I was running late from having my quiet time and he was like, come on, we got to get to school. You got to drive me. But other than that, walking Cannon to school is something that worked this year. I went back to therapy. I started doing EMDR and I went to a therapy intensive called Onsite. I went through their Living Centered program and I shared all about this in a past podcast episode. That was episode 54 called She Had a Breakthrough, Not a Breakdown. But just taking care of my mental health in that way really helped me get through the year. And I'm incredibly grateful. As Nick and I walked this morning and we said what works and what didn't, we both wholeheartedly said marriage worked this year. As we took that walk this morning, I just turned to him and said, again, I cannot thank you for how you've supported me, loved me, let me grieve, let me feel pain. He was so cute. And he said, listen, there's just not a lot that I'm good at in life. And he was like, but I do feel like I'm really good at taking care of you. And I was like, you are very good at taking care of me. And I don't want you to have to do it so much in 2025. But I am so incredibly grateful. And in general, I kind of constantly saw this time, these opportunities, that's not a great way to say it, but these opportunities are options throughout this really hard year where we could have turned on each other. We could have blamed each other. We could have just withheld love or affection or tenderness from one another. And instead, I feel like we just broke open for each other and just let each other grieve and be where we were at and let each other laugh when we could. And I don't know, I'm just incredibly grateful. And as we move into 2025, it'll be our 20th anniversary this July. I just want to say there are many years where I wouldn't have said hey, 100% what worked was marriage. I'm just really grateful for the Lord and grace and time. And I'm able to say that this year. Here's something else that worked this past year, and that was hosting retreats. It wasn't a plan that we didn't go into 2024 saying hey, we're going to start hosting all these retreats, but we hosted one in March, our very first soul camp at Go and Tell Gals. And we realized man, this is very life-giving. And so that's a gentle foreshadowing and a follow-up to say, I perceive that we'll be doing a lot less Zoom coaching this year and a lot more hosting retreats. We just realized there's something really beautiful and special about getting a handful of women in a room and coaching them and encouraging them and creating space for them to grow together. Writing worked this year really well. So remember my big wink Easter egg. I won't say any more than that, but I will just say, I think I've shared online, but I wrote a book this summer when the world was seemingly falling down around me. And when I was in the middle of so much pain, I did not feel like I had to write a book. I felt like I had an invitation from the Lord to write a book in the midst of that. And it was incredibly life-giving. And I'm really excited to share more about that as the year comes. But I love getting to be an author. I love writing. I love that It makes sense to me. I love that it's life-giving. And also, massive shout out to anyone who maybe says, like, you know what? I think that could be me too. Speaking of retreats and speaking of writing and speaking of coaching, we are very excited because in early 2025 at Go and Tell Gals, we are hosting our first ever book camp. So book camp is a retreat we're hosting February 24th and 25th. It's a 2-day retreat for women who are ready to share their God-given message. So this is for women who think they might want to write a book, but they have no idea where to start. We're going to coach you leading up to the retreat and then during the retreat. And the hope is that you will leave equipped with everything you need to move from idea to book proposal, that you would have all the tools you need to begin the publishing process if that's something you feel called to. So book camp is for the woman ready to serve her reader, impact her community, declare that her words have the power to change lives. And at book camp, we're going to confront the barriers holding you back from bringing your work into the world, draw out what God has put in you. We're going to map out your journey from first draft to marketing your book, empowering you with real strategies and practical steps and community accountability to make this call a reality. So you can see a link to sign up for book camp in the show notes. We have very limited spots. And again, that's February 24th and 25th. So I would so love to see you there. Another thing that worked in 2025 is speaking. I spent more time on the road traveling to speak in 2025 than I have spent maybe in the 2 or 3 years before that combined. And it was a delight. It was an honor to travel to so many churches and conferences and teach the word of God. Again, even in the hardest year of my life, to be able to show up and do what God had called me to be able to learn from so many different places. And for the past few years, I've really slowed down my travel to speak. And mainly because I felt like I had a lot of responsibilities, not only in my home with my family, but also at our church at Bright City. But what I realized this year is that both my church and my family are in really good places to send me to speak. And on top of that, my team really massively did an incredible job solidifying the process for me to go. And so massive shout out to my teammate, Katie, who just revamped my entire speaking process. And she just made it a lot more simple for me to travel and go do what God's asked me to do. And so if you would like to have me come speak at your church or conference in 2025, I think I only have about 3 or 4 dates open. So holler at me. I'd love to see you, or else I can see you maybe in 2026. Okay. Very last thing, my gratitude journal from Go and Tell Gals. We essentially made a gratitude journal based on the same gratitude practice that I have every single day. You can get this at goandtellgals.com or in the show notes. But that gratitude journal was the gateway drug to lots of faith and healing in my life. If I could open it every day, if I could just open the first page, vision and hope and prayer would start flowing every single day. And so if you have not used it, I want to massively encourage you, go to goandtellgals.com/shop. You can get a gratitude journal. We have 2 covers out right now. It's $28. And I'm telling you, it's the same gratitude practice I've been doing, but now it's in one tidy little journal that I get to take with me wherever I go. And it's changed my life. And I'm so grateful. So that's for me, what worked and what didn't in 2024. Very lastly, I want to just tell you, after going through the soft start guide myself, going through that process, answering those questions and really asking, like, what kind of guide do women need who maybe need a little bit of a softer start this year? I've come away with one thing that I want to share for me that's in the what's next category. And that's this. I'm going to do goals a little bit differently. I'm going to keep those same priorities that I had for the year, but I think what I'm going to try, I hope you hear my curious compassion with myself going into the year because I am starting slow. I think what I'm going to try is that rather than setting monthly goals or quarterly goals or even yearly goals, I think I'm going to start with 5 rhythms at a time. 5 rhythms or routines or shifts that I want to make in my life. And I'm only going to list 5 at a time. And when I feel like I've mastered them and I feel like they've had the fruit that I want them to see, and I feel like they're now a part of my life, I'll try 5 more. So maybe it'll be 5 in a week. Maybe it'll be 5 in a month. Maybe it'll be 5 in a quarter. And they're all kind of rooted in those same priorities for me: taking care of my physical health, taking care of my family, moving our family into this house, living simple and supernatural, leading Go and Tell Gals to growth. And so I'll share my first 5 rhythms for you for the year. Again, maybe these will take all of January. Maybe they'll take the first week. The first one is this: I want to get really good about taking my thyroid meds again. I take one medication twice a day. And to be honest, it's a little complicated little medication because I can't have food for an hour before or after. And so working that out every single day, twice a day, should be simple and easy, but is not always simple and easy for me. And so I want to get really good at taking it twice a day. I'm usually great at taking my first pill, not great at taking my second pill. I am going to try out 2 5 a.m. mornings a week where I go back to waking up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym before work and before I wake up with my kids. I'm not really in a place in my life where I want to do that every day of the week or even more than 2 days, but I'm going to try for 2 days and see if it doesn't help my endorphins, my energy, and my day flow a little bit better. Number 3, I want to really try and stick with a new ideal week that I have developed for myself. Basically just the way that I pattern my week, when I work, how I work, what I'm working on, when I'm exercising. But I really want to give this one that I've crafted with some intentionality a solid shot. My number 4 is that I want to cut out coffee in the afternoon. I do not perceive that it is serving me and it's time for it to go. And then number 5 is that I want to incorporate smoothies back in my life. I had my first one this morning and it was really life-giving. I think it'll be a great way for me to get some fiber and some protein and some healthy fat and a little bit of fruit in my body at the beginning of the day, because sometimes I'm a forget to eat breakfast girl and I want to do better about that. So those are my first 5. I'll add 5 more after that and 5 more after that. And I will update you at the end of 2025 and let you know how it went. But maybe that's for you. Maybe that'll serve you and maybe it won't. If nothing else, I cannot encourage you enough. Check out the Soft Start Guide. See the link in the show notes. And hey, thanks for your patience while I was gone. Thanks for listening now that I'm back. I have so much vision and excitement about this podcast. I literally cannot wait for next week's episode. So bless you. Thank you for being here. I'm going to just pray for us to send us out. God, you have been faithful and kind and gracious, and you have held us and brought us through 2024. Whether for some of us it was the best year of our lives, or whether for some of us it was the hardest, or whether for some of us it was just in between, we thank you for all of it. With all that we can, we say you give and you take away and you grow and you prune, and we love you. And we are so blessed that we get to have you, that we get to be upheld by you, that we get to be led by you, that we get to be sustained by you. But I do pray for everyone listening to this podcast right now. God, I pray that they would sense your nearness and your joy over their life, that as they evaluate the past year and as they think about the next, that they would do it without shame, that they would do it with honesty, but humility, but also just sensing your compassion and your kindness. We bless you for 2025. We bless you for what's to come. And we ask for your vision and your insight as we set some intention for this year ahead. Thank you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. Friends, I'm so grateful you listened to today's episode. Thanks for spending time with me. It would mean the world to me to connect with you. So you can send me a DM on Instagram at Jess A. Connolly, or head to my website, jessconnolly.com, for more ways to connect. If you have a minute to subscribe and leave a review of the podcast wherever you listen, it would massively help us reach more people with the good news that they can live fully awake. Let's go.